Rings of Power is a really bad show, but not for the reason you probably think it is. It's not because it has an agenda, or even because it warps Tolkien's original work. And while I realize I am late to the party in talking about this show, I have a good reason for digging up the grave of this long-dead controversy. You see, I'm not a Tolkien scholar. I haven't been reading the books every year for the last 40 years. I don't dive into the appendices in the same way that others do, and my channel, which discusses Lord of the Rings, is not as established as some others in the space here on YouTube. Now, I realize most of you probably clicked off during that last bit because that isn't a very flattering resume, but there is one thing that I would call myself an expert in, and that is the comparison of the Lord of the Rings adaptations to the original text. You see, over the last 12 months, I've taken it upon myself to document every single character, timeline, location, and plot difference between the Lord of the Rings movies and books, and I just completed that series. So, with it fresh on my mind, I wanted to address something that really annoys me, and that is when people claim that Rings of Power is bad because it is inaccurate to Tolkien's original work. Because in the same breath that people make this statement, they then bow down to Peter Jackson's work, turning a blind eye to the hundreds of deviations and revisions that he and his team made when they created the trilogy. But this isn't me condemning people for disliking Rings of Power, because I myself can barely get through it. Instead, in this video, I want to discuss the most glaring flaw in Amazon's adaptation, which surprisingly, not a lot of people have pointed out, and that is that the entire show feels manufactured. It feels like an industry plant. Like a band you've never heard of opening for your favorite artist on an arena tour, and you look up and wonder, who are these people and how did they get here? You check out their social media and find out they have a lot of followers with a very low engagement rate. And you go to their Spotify, which inevitably contains 8 singles, which all sound the same, and no albums. But when they do release an album, it will contain the 8 singles that their record label has strategically released, and maybe 2 songs which you've never heard. Oh, and they'll definitely have a TikTok. This metaphor of a plant in the music industry is actually quite accurate to how I feel about Rings of Power. And to better understand this, let's unpack the 3 points that reveal exactly why this show was doomed to fail before it ever began. When the first season of Rings of Power came out, there was something that immediately struck me as odd. It's hard to describe, but when I watched the show, I sat there thinking, why is this camera quality so good? It seemed uncanny, like I knew I was watching some people acting like elves because I could almost tell that they were on a set wearing costumes and pretending. It revealed to me that there was such a thing as being too polished, holding the camera too still, positioning it too symmetrically, following the same cinematography and style as every other streaming show which has proven successful. And when I say successful, I mean financially, which again leads back to the industry plant metaphor. Why be artistic and creative when you have a format that is proven? After all, if you're going to dump hundreds of millions of dollars into something, you want a guaranteed return, right? I had the same problem with The Mandalorian and many other streaming shows. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, they lack the authenticity of a real movie. And even movies aren't immune to this disease, as we've all seen the way that Marvel has deteriorated over the last 6 years. And while a lot of people will pin politics on these large companies, it really just comes down to money. Creativity is too risky. At the end of the day, it's a business and they'll do whatever they can to make the product as cheap as possible with the highest return. And what's one way they figured out to do this? Green screens. Oh boy, I could talk for hours about this horrible innovation. No matter how far technology progresses, the human eye, and more importantly, the human mind, has this strange ability to tell when something is fake. Like I said, it's almost like it's too polished. This was one of the pitfalls of the Hobbit trilogy, which utilized green screen and CGI for almost everything, making the whole viewing experience a weird mix of animation and reality. I have this conversation with people all the time. Can movies really call something live action if the only thing that is live about it is the actor? For example, there's a How to Train Your Dragon live action coming out. Really? You're calling it live action when the setting is green screen, the dragons are CGI, and the effects are all fake? But I digress. The main point is that Rings of Power has always felt weirdly too polished for my taste, whereas the original trilogy by Peter Jackson felt raw and real, and some might say wriggling. Shout out to Weta Workshops for that, honestly. To go back to the industry plant metaphor though, one of the reasons the most popular bands or artists have large cult followings is because those fans have been listening to them for a long time, all the way back to when their music was bad. It seems counterintuitive. Release bad music to get people to follow you? No way. But in reality, some of my favorite artists are the ones that I've seen progress and get better. I've witnessed their journey and built an authentic connection to their art. The strange thing about an industry plant is that one day you've never heard of them, and the next day they're releasing a song that was meticulously written by a professional and recorded in a studio that would typically cost $20,000 a session. And here's the worst part. The singer or musician that is the industry plant might be a genuinely good artist, but by the very nature of being given all the tools they need way too early, the record label unintentionally creates inauthenticity and a shallow connection with the people that are enjoying the art. The same thing applies to Rings of Power. Although the creators of the show might be genuine fans of Tolkien's work, and perhaps they're gifted writers, they are immediately doomed as they are handed a nearly billion-dollar budget and every resource they could ever need. And part of the resources the creators are given are the actors, which perfectly leads me into my next point, and that is that the cast aren't people we want, but the people the execs want us to want. Again, I need to clarify that I am not saying I dislike every actor in this show, and ultimately I blame a lot of the lackluster performance on poor writing, not poor acting. But what I do want to make a point of here is that oftentimes the corporate idea of what their audience wants isn't actually what the viewer wants. And I don't even always think it's due to the corporation wanting to make a political statement, because like I said, it always comes down to money. But I think mostly this is because the people making the decisions on who will be included are not the people who are in the trenches of the fandom. They don't understand what the fans want to see, and they don't even know themselves what they'd want to see really. I'd love to ask the casting people if they have ever even read Tolkien's work, and if they did, who did they picture in their mind's eye? Was it the people that we see on screen? I think there's just a major disconnect between the stuffy boardroom in which these decisions are made and the actual fandom itself. Like I said earlier, this isn't really about the quality or skill of the person themselves. Just like the musician that's a part of the industry plant can truly be skilled, so can the actor who is a part of a massive production. And my point here has nothing to do with looks or beliefs, but more so who they are. To go back to the music analogy, I find that the bands or artists I connect with the most at their highest are the ones that I knew at their lowest. In the same way that I like to listen to a band's worst songs to grow a connection with them early on, I like to know who the people are early on. When I get a random band slapped on my feed, do you really expect me to become a devout follower when I've never seen or heard any of these people in my life? Half of the reason why I like someone's music is because I feel like I know them as a person as well. Jacob Collier is a great example of this. He's a genius musician, but his style of music isn't what I listen to normally. I listen to him because I not only enjoy the music he makes, but I enjoy him as a person and respect him as the gifted musician that he is. But I didn't go from never listening to him to listening to him all the time. It took a few months of slow droplets of his content in my life for me to eventually decide to dive in. And while the Lord of the Rings trilogy included people who had never done acting in their life or had never been heard of before, it also included notable names and people who fans could grab onto and go, wow, I could totally see him or her as that character. I think out of all the points in this video that I'll make, this will probably be the one that people get most upset at, because I know it's a touchy subject. But at the end of the day, when I look at the cast of Rings of Power, I don't see the people that I would have chosen. For example, the casting choice for Gandalf is not in a million years who I would have chosen. Same with Bombadil. Those actors are gifted in their own right, and I wish them years of success on their own. But to play Gandalf and Tom? No way. But enough of character talk, let's end things off with the largest and most important factor in this entire video, which really brings things back to the heart of the entire issue. Growing up, my dad only liked a specific type of movie. He didn't really have a name for those kinds of films, but he had a name for the ones he didn't like, which was popcorn crunchers. Anytime my family went out to watch a movie like The Avengers, we'd get home all excited and then I'd ask my dad what he thought, and he would always respond the same. It's good, but it's a popcorn cruncher. When I was younger, I didn't fully understand what that meant or understand that my dad didn't invent that phrase himself. But as I grew up, I found myself saying the same thing. While I enjoy fun blockbusters with explosions, I tended to gravitate towards the deeper stories, like Interstellar, which usually my friends said I was crazy for watching because of how long they were. But I feel like this is the crux of the issue with Rings of Power. It's why Peter Jackson succeeded and Amazon has failed. While there will be a massive fanbase that watches Rings of Power for the large-scale fights and epic scenery, the majority of the die-hard fanbase who enjoy the deeper elements of Tolkien's legendarium will always consider Amazon's work a popcorn cruncher. Something I love about the Lord of the Rings trilogy is that Jackson made a documentary to go alongside it, which showcased all of the behind the scenes. There are hours and hours of content showing the hard work and dedication the entire crew put in to make those films possible. And by the way, I know Rings of Power releases behind-the-scenes stuff as well, but it's all released by Amazon Prime and through a very meticulously crafted marketing plan. Peter Jackson did his behind-the-scenes as almost a video for film school students. It was very authentic. And while I have no doubt that Rings of Power has a great crew, there's a big difference between these two undertakings. Something a lot of casual fans don't know is that Peter Jackson had to convince New Line Cinema to let him film 3 movies at once. Or I should say that it was a rare thing that New Line Cinema let him do it. Typically with a series, the studio would release a film and gauge the performance and revenue before dumping more money into a second or third film. Similarly to a TV show, a movie series could simply be canceled. But Jackson knew that if he made The Lord of the Rings, he had to do it right. And this affected the end product in 2 ways. For starters, it allowed the filming to be cohesive. They weren't filming scenes years apart or in drastically different locations. Odds are, if they filmed in Rohan for the 2 Towers, they also filmed their Return of the King scenes there as well, meaning the whole thing felt like it all went together. Each of the 3 movies in the trilogy seamlessly flow into one masterpiece. Now, the second element to this, and perhaps the more important one, is that the trilogy was truly a passion project for Peter Jackson. He knew he had one chance to get this right, and he also knew that it would be a disservice to Tolkien's story if the trilogy got canceled halfway through. So he had to convince the studio to let him release 3 films no matter what. And obviously, 17 Oscars later, it paid off. But how does this relate to the Rings of Power? Well, just like an industry plant, the project itself is the opposite of a passion project. Even comparing the Lord of the Rings trilogy to the Hobbit trilogy showcases this so clearly that I don't know if anyone can deny it. The moment you involve the corporate side of things, no matter how genuine the creator's intentions are, the art will be spoiled. Whether it is Amazon requiring certain things to be included in the show, or even something as simple as Amazon influencing the production, which could mean things as small as makeup and set design, it will spoil the authenticity of the passion in the project. I personally don't want a popcorn cruncher, a blockbuster that fits the mold. I want something innovative, original, and artistic. And almost everything Peter Jackson and his crew did, regardless of how inaccurate it was to Tolkien's story, was very innovative, original, and artistic. No shortcuts were taken, and therefore no shortcuts were felt while viewing. And while I might watch some shows as a popcorn cruncher and enjoy them, that isn't what I desire in an adaptation of Tolkien's epic lore about Middle-earth. At the end of the day, what hurts Amazon the most is the irony of having their Middle-earth adaptation be an industry plant. You see, if you know anything about Tolkien, you know that he hated industry. Whether it was because of his war experience or perhaps his religion, he was practically a hobbit himself in philosophy. The scouring of the Shire at the end of the entire book series is proof of this, as Tolkien almost makes the entire story point to this one moment in which the hobbits arrive home and find the Shire in shambles. Sharky, aka Saruman, has taken over and cut down everything green and good and replaced it with industry. Factories that pump out goods, taking a massive profit and leaving very little for the hobbits who are doing the work. And in turn, this decreases the quality of the product and slowly destroys the source at the same time. Sound familiar? It is very ironic that while creating a piece of art that is meant to honor and tell Tolkien's story, Amazon itself is participating in this behavior which the professor would never condone. And therefore, a lot of diehard Tolkien fans get this icky feeling when watching. They feel that it is too polished, which has the opposite effect of decreasing quality. They feel the people involved, actors or writers or crew, aren't those that they saw in their mind's eye, but rather a disconnected version of who the corporate heads want them to see. And they ultimately can tell that Rings of Power isn't a passion project, but a capitalistic opportunity for Amazon to cash in on one of the most well-recognized franchises in fantasy literature and cinema. And while Rings of Power might be good enough to earn the Popcorn Cruncher tag, it will never be good enough to earn the most coveted title any TV show or film can get: classic.